och välkomna till ett nytt avsnitt av Förändra Framtiden. Ett projekt som handlar om inkluderande metoder inom både forskning, kultur och konst. Idag är vi här på Malmö universitet där vi ska träffa Temi Odumosu. Vad jobbar hon med, Karin?
Hon är akademiker och forskare, doktor och jobbar främst med att läsa bilder ur postkoloniala perspektiv och se hur de bilderna hänger samman med den kultur vi har idag. Men hon skapar också utställningar, så hon har många strängar på sin lyra.
Och idag så kommer hon berätta för oss allt om sina metoder i sin forskning, men också varför hon använder sig av utställningar som en del av sin forskning och inte bara skrivandet eller de vanliga forskningsmetoderna. Och det ska vi höra mer om idag.
So welcome back to episode 2 of our series, and I'm Karin.
And I'm Sophia.
And yeah, we're Historielabbet. So today we're at Malmö University talking to Temi Odumosu, expert in post-colonial studies and especially image of black people. And you can introduce yourself and your research a bit more, please.
Yes, thank you. Hi. So I'm Temi Odumosu and I am a researcher and lecturer here at Malmö University. And I do many things. I'm an art historian by training. So I investigate the history of certain kinds of images, particularly related to slavery and colonialism. But then I also curate exhibitions, I collaborate with contemporary artists, and I teach. This is what I do here. I teach about media and stereotypes and the way in which images are produced both on and offline. So I have a mixed practice.
Thank you. So we sent you some questions, of course, before we got here, so you got a chance to look into what we were interested in. And you, as you said, you both are researcher, but you also curate exhibitions. But what methods would you say signify your work?
I mean, there are a number of methods that I think are very important to me. And the first one might sound really simple, but actually it's really important. And that is I really take a lot of time with the images I work with. And it depends on what the image is representing. I can give you an example from my research. So I used to spend some time researching human curiosities that were represented in paintings and prints in the 18th century. And these are artworks that already have quite a kind of challenging place in museums and also in different kinds of histories. So the first thing I had to do is come to terms with what I was looking at. And that meant returning to artworks, paintings, prints over and over again and looking at real depth. You know, these days when we see so many images on our iPhones and we're, swiping on Instagram, like we think we have seen things in the space of like 2 to 3 seconds. But I have spent, hours, days, like meditating on one artifact or one image and returning and seeing what I missed the last time and asking different kinds of questions. And for me, that time spent taking care is really important. For me, care is really about ethics. So I ask a lot of questions about who am I looking at that's represented in this artwork? What is their life story? Where can I find more information to give a greater sense of where they are situated in the context of history? And if I can't find that information, then the responsibility then falls on me to figure out how I can take care of their story or their image in a way that doesn't repeat a certain kind of violence that may be already embedded in the artifacts that I'm looking at.
So tell me, you're 18th century scholar, that's your special era of expertise. And first of all, what can those artifacts and images that you study tell us about that time, and also, if you want to elaborate on that, also about our time, because this is a series about our time as well, of course.
Yeah. So I decided to spend my PhD looking at representations of people of African descent. So that's people in West Africa, but also in the Caribbean, in Latin America, and in the newly kind of emancipated America in the 18th century. And I was interested in thinking about what the African's presence meant, particularly in the context of European images. So I spent a lot of time looking at prints and paintings primarily, but then of course to look at an image in the 18th century specifically, you're really looking at a political context. You're looking at discussions about abolition and should or shouldn't we have slavery and why. You're reading the diary entries of doctors who spend, years in the Caribbean treating people. You're also looking at the performative culture. You're reading plays, you're looking at songs they would sing on the street. So you're kind of trying to understand the world in which people lived and why certain images appear in that world. So what you find is that images are a way in which the meetings between Europe and other bodies, Africans, but also indigenous people. We have people from Polynesia. We have indigenous people from North America. They appear in images on one level so that Europe can understand what the world looks like and how they are situated within the context of the world. But then also they appear as kind of signs of the empire's reach.
Yeah.
And it's in that symbolic communication that you find stereotypes, you find things that are kind of hold a particular kind of image of different kinds of people. You also find caricature. You find differing levels of imagery, and some is very graphic and violent, and some of it is very beautiful. But all of it demonstrates that colonialism had an impact, and it had affect, and it shifted and changed the material culture that Europe lived within.
Yeah.
So we can see parallels between the ways in which we use images now to respond and react, and more people have access to the modes of production, which means that we can take our iPhones and immediately take a photo of something. We can bear witness to something. We can be a documenter. We can make memes and remediate and remix images. So we do that in response to our changing culture. And they did the same in the 18th century. In terms of colonialism and in terms of representations of difference, I don't think much has actually changed.
Oh, that's so sad.
It's sad, but it's true. Of course, there are counter image producers, people who are trying to make more sensitive, more balanced, more interesting representations of people from their own communities. This is clear. And it was also the same even in the 18th century. There were African writers, for example, who would write their own lives into being. So there has always been a counter image. But in terms of mainstream discourse, stereotypes are pretty much the same, So there are certain strategies that we have kind of inherited from history that are the same. And in a decolonial context, we would call that coloniality of power, the ways in which bodies or communities, cultures are controlled or through images, through signs, through ideas, represented in limited terms, basically, in order to maintain a certain kind of power relation in the status quo, right? So when you're in a culture, for example, that's predominantly white European, then you tend to find images of others that are quite reductive. Because images are political, they're a form of propaganda. They're there to both strengthen, collective pride, but also to give people a sense of where they are in relation to an other that people don't quite understand. So, this othering process and exotification, those processes are still there. And they probably won't change because, like I said, images are the space that we work out the stuff that is difficult or complicated or unfinished in a culture. So then the images will always be kind of representing somehow this conflict.
So you also speak about healing. What does that mean to you?
So I talk about healing on many levels. So if we think about exposure to a certain kind of colonial violence through images, images that continue into the present day, that comes with consequences, right? And so I'm interested in thinking about how can we recover really from a history of violence that is negotiated in culture and in other contexts as well. It's also negotiated politically, but if we think about culture specifically, what does it mean to be in the aftermath of images that reduce human beings to a status of property, right? There is a scholar, Saida Hartman, who talks about the afterlife of property. So if we are living in the afterlife of property, how does that work itself out in our relations to images in museums, for example, how we interpret, the way we describe, the language we use, and what are the ways in which we can kind of fix some of those inheritances? I mean, language is an interesting one in terms of how museums, for example, label artworks, right? And this is a major thing that kind of comes out regularly in different contexts. And there's always a debate in museums about, do we stick with historical terminology that helps us to understand where we've come from, or do we change the terminology so that we recognize that certain language might be harmful in the present day, or is harmful? It's not even might, but it is harmful. Yes, yeah. So, I mean, these are moments for healing in terms of coming to a reconciliation process about what history has done.
When do you know you reach some kind of healing in a process? When you have worked with the material for a while, or you've been sitting with an image, or you've been sitting with a story. How do you know when you reach that kind of healing in that process? Like, do you ever know that, or is it just?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question, and I kind of ask myself that more and more these days. Also, just how do you know when things are working? And so it takes time. We just have to kind of keep talking, keep revisiting, keep rethinking. So there isn't like a one moment of healing, but there are moments along the way where you realize, okay, we're coming to a deeper kind of understanding here, or something is shifting. And I kind of look for those shifts as a way to think, okay, it's worth doing this work, actually. Yeah. Otherwise, you're just talking about pain all the time, and it's like, no.
So you're an art historian, but you also use exhibition and curation as part of your research practice almost, and also a way to show your results in a way. And how do you think like that kind of practice complements your research? Because some academics just sits and reads and writes, but you also choose that kind of visualization of your research.
I mean, I don't come from a heavily academic background. So I understand that it can be very difficult to find yourself or find a place, a comfortable place to be in an academic context with the language, with the style of presentation, with the modes of teaching. So I understand that in order to be as open as one can be with what is happening in the academy, we do have to have public-facing dimensions to our work. I mean, we live with the effects of racist imagery every day, but maybe we don't fully understand where this is coming from, what this is a kind of continuity, or what the inheritance is. So it's my job to kind of point to this, what is happening, give it a historical context, and then also ask questions about why and how, and then how does it impact your life right now in the present. And I think, we should be doing that. So for me, the exhibition is just kind of like, it's just an extension of the arm of research, right? It's just, okay, and I've been doing this, and now I reach out and I share. So it's also a two-way process. It's not just that I'm just doing this, but that also that response is helping me to rethink my own practice as well.
Because sometimes that feels like there is a huge gap between what is done inside these walls and what's happening outside, and is the curation and exhibition a way to kind of like bridge that?
Of course. And the interesting thing about curation is that you're also making connections between things in a different kind of way. I think translation really matters on the level of access, and by translation I don't just mean into another language, but I mean sort of find a bridge, right? that helps people to travel over, even if it's just a little way. And then, you know, even if there's not a complete meeting, but at least something, whether it's, you know, how an artist works with material in an interesting way, something kind of captures people and then they can work with it in their own way.
Is there anything that you feel like, oh, this is actually really important, but it wasn't part of the questions? Or
Yeah, I mean, you know, I know that people don't like the word diversity, but it's the only word that can possibly describe what is needed to kind of ensure that, you know, okay, so for example, H&M does a crazy thing in one of their advertising, or Prada does something crazy in there and makes a very racist product. Part of the questions that we are asking our students now are, okay, but what happened in the design conversation room?
Yeah.
Like what happened in the meeting?
That's what I
or
always
didn't happen in the meeting
wonder.
that made that this thing got to the point where it's a controversy.
Yeah.
The key to ensuring that this world of images transforms, really truly transforms, is diversity, is having a plurality of perspectives and approaches to methodologies, right? And I think diversity, not just as a way to say, oh, we have an extra brown person there, great, tick box. I mean, really thinking that, you know what, this is a space in which we need more voices beyond our own. And, you know, how do these voices move through structures? Is it just that we go out and consult people when we have a problem, but that the actual structure remains a cluster of normative voices? No, we need everybody to be employed, on the board, you know, like making this a very dynamic space in which to produce culture and to help us figure out where we are in the world and what comes next. We can't do that in, you know, cultural silos, these monocultures. No, I mean, we just can't. That's something that you learn in academia very quickly. You know, interdisciplinary collaboration, intercultural collaboration works best, generally.
Så en viktig bild, det var den här bryggan eller bron mellan dåtiden, alltså i det här fallet 1700-talet och nutiden, och just det som Temi studerar är, hon studerar såklart många saker, men bilder framförallt, bildkulturen, hur de lever kvar, alltså både stereotyper och karikatyrer, men också kanske andra bilder som skapades av slaveriets maktbalans. Och även om slaveriet inte i den bemärkelsen som det fanns på 1700-talet finns kvar idag, så kan rester av den bildkulturen finnas kvar och reproduceras idag. Den reproduceras i reklam och i mode till exempel. Och när man har den bryggan kan vi se det, för vi kanske inte ser det, för det här är ju bilder som vi är vana vid. Vi sköljs över av massor av bilder hela tiden. Men när vi får den bryggan mellan dåtid och nutid synliggjord, så kan vi också börja förändra.
Men jag tänkte väldigt mycket på det här hon pratar om healing och care och typ hur man tar hand om ett material. För ofta när man tänker på forskning så tänker man på hårda data, siffror, analys. Att en forskare är hjärna men inte känsla. Och jag tycker att hela den här idén om att ta hand om, att försöka laga, att försöka vara personlig med ett material är ganska ovanligt för forskare. Och kanske ovanligt också i hur man tänker på en forskare. Att den är just den här hjärnan som analyserar men inte känner. Men det faktum att hon har gjort det till en metod att känna och att vilja ta hand om personen bakom siffran, bakom statistiken, bakom historien, tycker jag är en jätteviktig metod att ta med sig när man arbetar med forskning och research.